My name is Justin Gage, and you're tuned in to the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast with your host, Jason Woodbury.
Welcome back to Transmissions. Music shapes and fundamentally changes us. Once we have listened, we do not stop. We do not ever recover from music. We will return again and again to the radio, the record store, the bedroom where girls listen to records all day. That's a quote from the great new Rickie Lee Jones book, Chance Texaco. She joins us this week on Transmissions to discuss writing the book, and her experiences in California in the 70s when she became a huge star. We get to really cover a lot of stuff from the book, including that incredible SNL performance that really catapulted her name into the headlines. And we also talk a lot about Phoenix because it's really rare to have an eloquent book like this with so much of it set in the town where I live. So we get into that, and Rickie was a great guest. I really appreciate her taking the time to join us here on Transmission. So without much delay, we're going to get into the conversation, but first, a word from our sponsors. If you dread looking at your credit card statements, you're not alone. So many Americans experienced financial hardship in the last year. Upstart can help you regain your footing and get things back on track. Upstart is the fast and easy way to pay off your debt with a personal loan, all done online. Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get one fixed monthly payment. Upstart knows you're more than just your credit score and is expanding access to affordable credit. Unlike other lenders, Upstart considers your income and current employment to find you a smaller rate for your loan. With a 5-minute online rate check, you can see your rate up front for loans between $1,000 to $50,000. You can receive funds as fast as one business day after accepting your loan. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/aquariumdrunkard. That's upstart.com/aquariumdrunkard. Don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. Go to upstart.com/aquariumdrunkard. And now, my conversation with Rickie Lee Jones. Thanks for tuning in to Transmissions. All right. Well, Rickie, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here on Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions. It's a real thrill to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me and my bird friend.
Yeah. So how have things been in New Orleans lately?
Well, the summer started, and that's always oppressive, but then it's been raining, so it's been cooler. And people have unmasked, so they're pretty happy, jubilant out there. And they love being with each other again and being back to normal.
Yeah, it feels pretty good, I'm sure. How did you hang in through the pandemic?
I did pretty well. I'm a secular person. I'm not part of the religion of hanging out, so I stay in mostly anyway. But I did start to notice that even the little bit I like to go out, even the little bit that I did like to go out, I was starting to really feel blue, so I could relate.
Yeah.
Out there again.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on this fantastic book. It was an incredible read. I already knew you were a great writer because I've listened to your music, but I don't know. You pick up some of these music memoirs, and you're never sure, and but boy, this was an incredible read. I really, really liked it. Did you enjoy writing it?
Oh, I loved writing it. I'm going to come in because it's buzzing out there. It took me many years, and I had been thinking about it in the years before I wrote it. So it's a delight to tell you what happened. And the written word is like creating a universe. You can go anywhere you want to go. And the more you rewrite,
yeah,
the more control you have over where you go. Some of the earlier ones had a lot of prose, and I was guessing, I should write more descriptions, and then every once in a while I'd want to make a point. Here's what I have to say about that.
Yeah.
And so it took a long time for those things to fall away and the meat of the story to remain.
Yeah. You said you wrote it for it took a while. How many years did you work on it?
I think it was 7 years, but the Grove, my publishers said they were talking to me for 10 or 12 years. So, my agent said we started talking in 2009 or 2007. So
wow.
It was a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was worth it. It's an incredible book, as I've mentioned. And, I didn't know how much Phoenix would be in it. That's where I'm at. So you at one point tell a story about driving a stolen car down Bethany Home, and
that's right.
And that's my house is right off Bethany Home. We're off Bethany Home in the Christown area. So
that's where I grew up. Not too far from there. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, so I was really like, the Phoenix stuff was really great. How would you characterize Phoenix as far as a place to spend time? You spent time in other places too growing up, but Phoenix was where a big chunk of it was. When you look back on Phoenix, what are your impressions of the city?
Well, then I think it was a rarefied and magical honor to grow up in a desert. It was still a pretty small city or big town. It wasn't anything like it is now. And there was one park in Canto Park. I don't know what you got now, but I bet you got more than one.
We've got more than one, but we've still gotten Canto. It's a good one.
Yeah. And there was Scottsdale had a mall, and Christown, and maybe something on Thomas Road, but maybe that was the one, but there just weren't very many places to go. And I was a child, so I'm not the best person to describe Phoenix.
Sure.
Because I only saw it as from a child's view in the car. But one thing I see now is it's totally built. And when I was there, there'd be a half acre empty, and then a housing tract, and then 3 acres empty, and then orange grove. And, it was still very, very interesting that houses sprouting up like mushrooms,
Yeah. Yeah. You write about moving to Glendale at one point, I think. And you talk about how that's pretty much the edge of town at the time when you were there. Yeah. That was it. There wasn't much more. There is much more now. It keeps going. It's a sprawl. But yeah, I don't know. Writing it was just such a thrill to read some of that stuff, to read about, watching Wallace and Ladmo on TV, the children's thing. I remember that even from when I was a kid, and it was like, you talk, I think, about seeing CCR at the Coliseum.
That's right.
And I was like, that sounds great. Do you remember other shows? Do you remember seeing any other bands here growing up?
Sure, I did. I saw Simon and Garfunkel, and I saw either Peter and Gordon or Chad and Jeremy. I think it was Peter and Gordon played. And one of them had a hat on, and he threw the hat out. And I grabbed it, and some surfers took it away from me. I was so proud to be the guy who got the rock star's hat.
Yeah.
Those were I think the Chad and Jeremy thing was the first concert I ever went to.
Yeah. Yeah. But
whoever it was, sorry.
But you knew pretty much early on that music was your sort of your true love, right?
Yeah. Well, I also liked acting. And I'd been studying ballet all my life and tap, and I knew that I wanted to perform, and whether I got lucky as an actor or a singer, I would have been happy either way, I think.
Yeah. Well, there are parts of there I mean, gosh, there are so many moments in the book that feel so vivid, and I think about the way you describe scenes, the way you describe what's happening around you at times, and it makes me wonder, do you have like a pretty good memory, or are you somebody who takes notes or keeps diaries, things like that? Were there things you had to consult back on, or was a lot of this straight from your head?
Well, the childhood memories are cemented and vivid, and they never move.
Yeah.
The closer to now, the harder it is to retain.
Sure.
So that's how that was. Those are really vivid memories. And there was a time when I was 20 or 25 where I remember thinking, if I tried, I bet I could remember every day of my life. There was still a thread from this moment to that week, to that month, to that year. I could find my way all the way back to my first memories. So for whatever reason, whatever that is, that those early years are still powerfully vivid and cinematic.
Yeah. And the more recent stuff, or the stuff that a little bit less so.
Either there's no more room in there, or, as a famous person, I meet a lot of people, and I just don't have a facility for remembering names. And maybe because I don't have anything to hang the events on, they just get washed away. So there's a lot of people who said, yeah, I remember we drove down to Mexico. And I'm like, oh, really? I don't remember that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any conversations with people as you were building the book to sort of like go back and either discuss things that had happened or commiserate? No?
No. I didn't. You know what? My friend began to fact check stuff. Like when I talked about being arrested in Detroit, he did some fact checking just about Detroit. And as much as he could, I was at a Jimi Hendrix concert. He found that concert online. So, but other than that, I don't think, unfortunately, so many of the people I knew are dead. And there's like Ivan died and Mark died, but and I don't talk to the rest of them. So.
Yeah. There's a million things that come to my mind. The first thing, you tell great stories about run-ins with people, and you have some pretty incredible run-ins in this book. Bob Dylan calls you a true poet. That's a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, it was a great moment.
And then you got to, when I got to the part where you were meeting Van Morrison in Ireland, I was like, halfway through the story, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this just seems so magical and so perfect. And then there's a turn in the story, which I don't want to spoil too much, but I don't think that many people will be surprised to learn that Van Morrison can sometimes be a testy person. And the story just turns, and I thought, wow, that was so fun.
So fun. What an adventure. And my escort to the festival, when things like this have happened to me, it's made me feel a kind of destiny, as if it were written. I'm so escorted so perfectly to and from where I wanted to go. When I wrote the book, I wrote it with that in mind, that there seems to be a theme of magic that I recognize. And I also wrote it so that it would feel like fiction, like you're reading, fiction, because memoirs are very boring, I think. And as much as you might want to know, the way people write about what they did in a kind of diary form is boring. And then I did this, and then they said that. And frankly, I feel like that. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I looked at a couple. I looked at Rita Hayworth's, and because I like Rita Hayworth, and Ava Gardner. And I thought, well, clearly somebody else wrote these. These are written by the hand of Ava. And,
right.
And also, I read Gil Scott Heron book that had come out, and he wasn't writing that either. This is edited in mid-idea or mid-thought. So I thought, well, I have that going for me. I know where I want to go and why I'm going there, and I'll just keep writing it. And that much, because there's a theme, is going to make it a better memoir, because I recognize that they're to make a good book, because many people might have interesting lives. I have an extraordinary life, but to convey that into literature, you have to have a theme so that the reader has a good adventure with you.
Yeah, well, you succeeded on that because it felt like an adventure, a harrowing one at times. There's some dark moments in here, and you have some very painful stuff with family and with a lot of other stuff. But I'm glad you mentioned the term magic, because I found myself very, we spoke in 2019 for Aquarium Drunkard, and we talked about we were discussing your song Satellite from Flying Cowboys, the record you made with, speaking of somebody who's passed away, Walter Becker. And you told me, I'll never forget this, because this hasn't happened very often. I've done a lot of interviews, but very few times have I felt sort of like a lightning bolt moment like this. But you said, that when you were writing that song, you were aiming for joy. And then I told you that I had included that song a few years earlier on a playlist that I had titled Joy is the Aim, after a Mary Margaret O'Hara song that I also included in it. But anyway, to me, that synchronicity was such an exciting thing. And I wonder if, when you talk about looking back on your life like this, do you notice little things like that, little synchronicities where it feels like the story, like you said, had been foretold in some way? How do you define magic, these days?
Well, I think you know the answer to that. Yes, I definitely found places where when I laid the story out before me, I'd already felt that way. But when I laid it out before me, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I've always felt a connection to the invisible world, and there's no words to describe what that is, but the way that it manifests before me, I go, well, these are some pretty impossible and wondrous connections, as if they're written from a place above time and outside of time. So what is magic? Well, I assign a kind of goodness to magic. I feel like it can be many things, but the answer that comes up right now when you ask me is, it's the way the invisible world speaks to us. We experience it as non-linear, non-sequitur even. But it's not. It's just a different language than the one that we have to use to live here. And we see it all the time in coincidence and in other things that are inexplicable. So that's what I think. In my life, it's consistent and it's not explainable. And I have no doubt that it is. I don't have to explain it.
Do you feel like the music evidences it? Do you feel like when you hear the music, you go, that had to involve these chance elements and this thing of the unknown, of the invisible world impact? Some of it?
I love music, yeah. But, music, I don't know why, but, and so there's music and then there's singing. two really different things. When singing, as we make that sound resonate against our skeleton, and it goes out into other people, it is so it evokes so much passionate emotion in people that for us singers, we know we're dealing with something like that magic cactus. We know it's an elixir that takes people further than anything else, music as well. So I feel like I'm not wanting to answer because I don't have an answer for it. I can make up a lot of stuff, but
that's okay. Yeah, you don't have to do that.
I have an answer.
I do wonder in terms of the contrast between writing lyrics and writing, music, and then the process of writing a book, how different they are, or if you found that there were similarities or overlap.
Well, people have said the book is like my lyrics, which at first I was baffled. But now, as a few months have gone by and I've read some stuff, I recognize how, and they've said things like the rhythm of it, and I go like, what? But suddenly I understand that there is a music taking place, a music of revelation, a subtle thing. That's the way I do things. I thought that's the way I do things, but it's the way I write music as well. So what did you ask me again?
I think I was just...
the lyrics, the difference between lyrics and writing, right?
Sure.
So a lyric is you say a great deal with just a little bit. And that could be the fault of the book, is I continue to say a great deal with a little bit for 300 pages. So, because every 2 pages, a lot has gone on. But you're using prose. In the book, I had to do a thing that was very unnatural to me, which was to explain.
Yeah.
So if I say, we went in prison at 8:00. In prison, you have to do it. And because I assume you get that. I don't know why. I assume you know that, you get that, you did that. My friend had to go, they don't know. You have to tell them. And if they have to tell them, I don't even want to talk to them. So it was a big process of going, you can't expect them to know what you know. And it was a life-changing thing that I had taken for granted, that what I knew, everybody else knew. So that was a wonderful thing that I learned about writing a book. The other problem with the book that makes it great, don't get me wrong, it is a beautiful book, but it's much harder to get it to an agent to make a film out of it, because it's not one simple story. It's so deep that how could you ever represent this book in film? I think there are a bunch of wonderful stories in it, wonderful ways to represent it in film, but I don't think anybody's going to be licensing The Last Chance Texaco and making a movie out of it. But that's okay, because people will read it, right?
Well, yeah. Did you read the audiobook yourself, or did you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I haven't listened. I want to listen to it next to hear if I can. I want to hear some of those rhythms in action, because I do think there is a pace to the book.
I have such a strange way of speaking. And it took a while as I listened. I went, wow, I'm really going to get in the way of the book. But as I kept listening, I kind of liked it. I thought, I wish I spoke a little faster, but I haven't read anybody going, you should not have read your book.
Well, yeah, don't look too hard. You'll find somebody saying something terrible anywhere if you look hard enough. It's funny that you mentioned, though, that it's not. It's funny that you mentioned that you don't think it would necessarily make a great movie, because it does feel strikingly cinematic at a lot of points.
Yes.
And so, one, I think that it would be maybe could be a better television program than a serialized TV program than a single movie. But two, how important is sort of cinema and the sort of like the language of setting a scene in a sort of visual way? You know, how important is that to you? And was that something that you thought to yourself when you were writing the book, I want to have a sense of that? Because it's in there. I don't know. I almost feel like there's lighting in there, you know? I don't know.
That's wonderful. I think I managed to do what I do in songs, which is to make it real. And I don't know how I did that, but people have said, I really feel like I was there with you.
Right.
So I managed to light the scene. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. I wasn't thinking at all about films, but there's a few answers to what you said. I've so wanted other people to interpret my work.
Yeah.
Other singers, directors, people to engage my work and take it out into the larger world. And it wasn't a thing I wanted when I was 25, but I really do now. And it's not that I understand I can't control it or don't want to control it. I want to see what happens when somebody else takes this thing and takes it out. I'd love to see it done well. The problem is I haven't ever seen a good movie about a musician ever.
Huh.
And so I think that if anybody wrote a screenplay, it would have to be about the little girl or the teenager or the car or the hotel. And because when they just don't know how to show us, you know, they always make us look dreamy and clownish. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I'm tempted to say maybe there have been some good movies made about musicians, but none. But none. Well, they're all fictional when I think about them. Spinal Tap. Yeah. Spinal Tap is a great movie about music, but because it's not a real band, it's all the bands, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great movie, but
so
but it's irreverent. And I guess when they try to be, tell an important story, they get it wrong.
That sense of importance and that sense of like sort of self-seriousness, mm-hmm. I want to say that the book doesn't fall into that. It doesn't fall in. You write very affectingly and very like you're a funny writer as well as everything else. You know, there's a comedy to it in a way, a gentle comedy at times, and then sometimes less gentle, but it's all in there, you know. At the same time, you aren't afraid occasionally to become very lyrical in the pages. And I love that happens so often near the end of chapters. You'll do this sort of beautiful little dissolution. It'll just sort of dissolve. The chapter just sort of fades out, you know? And early on you write this quote about how music shapes us and how once it grabs a hold, I'm not quoting it 100% correctly, but once it grabs a hold, it never lets go. And I just found myself struck by the prose element of it. So it feels to me like you felt free at some point to be able to hop between these approaches. We're a little more impressionistic now. Now we're talking hard details. Now we're scene setting, and now we're drifting off into the cosmos, you know? And to me, that seems like that is evidence of the kind of fun you were having and the kind of engagement that you were having with this. I knew when Walter Becker passed away and you wrote a piece for Rolling Stone, I remember just finishing that and being like, holy shit, what a great writer. So I was a little teed off with the book, but do you feel like you want to write more? Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I am writing more now. I'm writing short stories. Some of the people that were in the book, some people you didn't meet. I like this very short story form, and it's already I think it will take a shape, you know, a larger shape. I always trust that will happen. Yeah. But I'm really enjoying these characters that you didn't get to meet before, like Damon Runyon Omnibus, just little stories of people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that sounds great. I can't wait to read that. We've touched a little on your days in Phoenix, but eventually you of course move out to LA, and you're going to be a star, or you're going to play music. And I wanted to ask a little bit about some of the artists who maybe inspired you most to want to go out there. You write about Laura Nyro and hearing her for the first time. What was that like? What kind of impression did she make on you?
Well, I'd already been primed by West Side Story, and I was enamored of the East Coast rough, big city life. Phoenix was the antithesis of that, and I wanted and her stories. I'd had this brief episode in Chicago that I talk about. And her stories reminded me of those characters I'd met, tough Puerto Rican girls, and even that one album cover she had with the purple lipstick. Even she, in a way, wove a fiction about. So when you enter her songs, you're ready for it. So I think that that's what she represented, the possibilities of other lives. She continued the characters I met in West Side Story. She was a storyteller, and she used music, and that was thrilling to me. Yeah.
How about the more West Coast stuff? I mean, you showed up, and it was sort of like maybe the Laurel Canyon thing had sort of maybe evaporated a little bit, but there was still stuff happening, and there was still this thing. Were there any specific reasons that you decided I want to go to LA versus going to the East Coast, or was it just geographic proximity?
That's what I was
going to say. Was it just, well, this is the closest big city, I'm going to head over there, see what's what?
Yeah, I'd say it was proximity, and LA was the center of show business, of music, of, I didn't really think of New York as a center of hippies. They might have been there, but they were over in California, and I wanted to be near them and their lifestyle.
Yeah. When you look back on those early days in LA, how does it feel now to reflect back?
Like when I was 18 and went to Venice, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Or when I was younger? Well, everything is seen through the eyes of the person that you were. So the perspective it would be great if I could have a perspective through those eyes, but I've changed so much that I'm not on any street in LA anymore. I'm not experiencing life from the beginning and the hill to come. I've gone way over that hill and down into the valley.
Yeah.
But I could tell you that Venice was just, whatever it had been in the 60s or the 50s, it was dead. And there were only a few living souls there, some leftover Jews from the Holocaust who lived down at the other end. And on the edge, there were the very beginnings of black gangs. And here on the beach, a few ragtag people trying to start businesses and go to college. So what it is now is a horrific skeleton, a living zombie of what it was then. Mm. What it is now is a bunch of cheap merchants and homeless people. And even though we were very poor, there was a dignity about us. There's no dignity there in Venice anymore. I don't know what it's become. So I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but when I look at the path behind me and what's become of it, it's too bad. But yeah. I know that young people will make the best of that thing. So because we're so full of life, we come in and make the best of it. But it looks pretty broken to me now.
Yeah. How long have you been in New Orleans?
let's see, well, off and on about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah. You're pretty happy there at this point?
Here. Yeah, I came here for two reasons. First was the traffic, because I spent all my day in a car going somewhere in LA. And the other is the money, because there's just something wrong if it costs $1 million to buy a house, a crappy house, and the rest of the country doesn't spend $1 million in
Right.
10 years. So it was just wrong to be there.
Yeah.
I love to visit. I've lived there, for the better part of my life off and on. But this place, and the South probably in general, but this place still has living remnants. So it can't be a remnant if it's living, but it still has the past alive and well, and so much courtesy, which made me feel a part of the world. Every time I go out, my neighbors talk to me. Kids who are 12 or 14 say, hi.
Yeah.
Like, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I'm thinking about the cover of the book, and I was thinking about the choice that you made to include, you've got a beret on the cover, of course. Famously, that's a big part of your visual look, your statement. Did you ever consider? Did you consider other photos for the cover? Were there any beret-less photos that you considered?
The cover was meant to draw your eye. So if I was naked and looked good, I'd have put that on the cover. I had a couple photographs from a pirate session that hadn't been used very much. And they were beautiful. And I was, I was going to use those for a couple of years, but every once in a while I'd see this cover. I had it for my Google name or something. And suddenly I said, oh my God, that's so definitive. And nobody's seen that picture, that girl leaning on the car. That's from the first few months of the record. So, I just thought it would invite you to what's coming in the book and also catch the eye. If my book was ever in a bookstore in the airport, which it'll never be, but if it was, it would catch your eye.
Yeah, yeah. When we spoke the last time, you told me you felt like the debut album in 2019 remained your favorite.
Yeah, it does.
But it sounds like Pirates and this. Pirates was a big deal as well. That was you really pushing in a way. Was it that situation where it's like, they always say you have your whole life to write your first album, and then you have to come up with a second one. Were you pulling from songs that you had already written when you went into Pirates, or was a lot of it new?
All of it was new.
Yeah.
You do have your whole life. And those first songs are full of your dreams and plans and the power to make dreams come true. The second record, in my case, was to prove that the first record wasn't a fluke, because people really wanted to go, well, there's another woman we're going to throw away after her hit is over. And such success, such notoriety, how will she ever survive it? And I thought the only way I'm going to survive it is to absolutely ignore it and make something totally different but not totally different, because I want to continue the idea of characters and storytelling, but I'm not going to be so sweet. There'll be no sweetness on this record. And I have the feeling Pirates is kind of masculine. It's the masculine thing to the very feminine first record. I'm not sure why people like it better, because to me, the first record has so many great songs. I love the overall piece of Pirates, but I don't hear anybody covering very many of my songs, period. But if they did, they'd probably go to the first record first. So maybe they see that as dismissive because it's friendly and we dismiss friendly things. But I quite love Last Chance Texaco, Saturday Afternoons. Company is a very different kind of thing.
Yeah.
I question the production of some of the, even at the time, of things like Danny's All-Star Joint, but because I would have done it rougher. But I stand by what the producers chose to do with those things, and I think they've remained interesting through the years, 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah, when you say you would have done it rougher, you remember like having conversations like that in the studio, that you were nervous that it was too glossy?
We wouldn't have used that word because that would have been insulting.
Sure.
But yes, I think, would I have, I can't tell you for sure if I would, because it was my first time in the studio.
Yeah.
So if I would challenge somebody, how do I say, I don't like the way the bass player is doing that on the 4-chord or something? Because I just don't know what anything is. But I could sense that it was way too, and my vocabulary as a musician was limited. So I would have felt it was big. It's not like, it's not like Elvis with the upright bass and you can hear the fingers thumping. They took out as much noise as they could.
Sure.
A very noisy guitar player. So they made it as perfect as they could. I wouldn't have done that. And as you can see from later records, I didn't. But people like that sound from me. And at the end of the day, we're in business. And if I like a noisy record and nobody buys it, I have to rethink that,
Yeah.
It's not an artistic statement, the music and the writing and the singing is the artistic statement. I just never felt the production, my blood isn't there in the production. So it's okay with me if it's smoother or not smoother.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about this SNL moment and how nerve-wracking it was. I can't even imagine the sort of pressure and the stress of this situation where here you are, not entirely unknown, but relatively unknown to much of America. They didn't know.
Totally unknown.
Yeah,
the record hadn't come out yet. Yeah.
Right. So how did you, I mean, what was going through your head? You write a lot about what was going through your head, but how often do you watch a performance on SNL these days?
Oh, never.
Right? So they don't sound very good most of the time. 9 times out of 10, I don't feel like the performances sound okay. Yours sounds pretty good. So I have to imagine that we're talking about magic. That must have felt a little bit like one of those magic moments. But you were worried they were going to cut the second song, and so was that going through your head as you start in?
No. Once I stood in front of the camera, I was aware that this is a moment where all life will change if you do it right.
Yeah.
And don't faint, because that's a lot of pressure. Don't start shaking or you won't be able to sing. Be focused. And like I wrote, I think probably 40 seconds in, I had gotten over the fear and was like already going downhill. It went by so fast.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I left it in the book, but my mother said, when I called her afterwards, she said, "Oh my God, I could tell you were so scared. I thought I was going to faint." Only my mom could see by my expression that I was like, when I've seen it, I've gone, you look fine. Nobody can tell.
Yeah. I think you write about almost feeling like you're hearing the words come out of your mouth and you're like, well, they're the right words. I'm doing okay. And it's that feeling of almost like leaving your body to witness this thing happening. That must, have you felt how often do you feel that sort of thing in a live performance? Has it happened other times?
I feel that. I try. I think I played at Carnegie Hall for the jazz record. I forget which one it was. And that was I had put some pressure on myself and I did a really good job. That stuff happens when you put pressure on yourself. Yeah. And I really try not to do that. I try to keep things measured. Every performance is important. Otherwise, I mean, I know it's an amazing ride, but then if you slip at all, you'll condemn yourself. And it doesn't have, that was a real thing, Saturday Night Live. But the other stuff is kind of ego stuff. So try to keep that ego out.
Yeah.
And just enjoy it all. I can't think of another one except maybe Carnegie Hall.
When you had talked about sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. I don't know how. I'll cut this part out. What I was going to say was when you started into the music business, you talked about how there were these sort of literate and progressive things on the radio, these really smart, interesting things. But by the time growing up, but then by the time you get to doing your thing, you don't dig what's on the radio. You're not feeling very connected in that regard. And you're kind of doing you're in your own lane a little bit. And I wonder, did you think at the time, if you had to sort of come up with like, who are my contemporaries, aside from the people who you just knew, people like Tom Waits and Chucky, like, were you thinking in terms of like, where does my music fit into the sort of overall lineage of rock and roll or music history? Were you thinking that really at all?
I think I was inventing something new. That's what I thought I was doing. Yeah. I was bringing this femme fatale idea from the 50s into the 1970s. I didn't see her anywhere. All I saw was Farrah Fawcett. So I went, I'm going to bring this dame with hat, gloves. I like her. I'm going to be her. And I stayed with that. So other folks, if there were any other folks, the not the punk rockers, but the rockabilly guys were also hearkening back to another time. So there were some kids doing that kind of thing, but nobody was doing the particular thing I was doing. And I fed off being the only guy doing it. It gave me authenticity, I guess is the word they like. And it also made the setting of these songs different because if I put on a polyester dress and Farrah Fawcett in my hair and sang these songs, well, you want a new, clear creature that's singing these songs. So David Bowie reinvented himself all the time, but his characters were kind of, they were a little thin, right? They're really personal, his own personal identities. He tries to bring them out and have you understand what he's saying. But I had, the hair and the this and the that. And to me, a 23-year-old girl, that was enough.
Sure. You devote a lot of time in the book, as I've mentioned, to your family, and you had these vaudevillian grandparents and your dad and your mom. You devote a lot of time about them, a lot of page space to discussing your family. And I wonder if it informed, you have your own family now, you have a daughter, did this book inspire conversations with her about things that maybe you just sort of like had to dig up or I'm curious how it affected your relationship with her.
Well, she stays out of my conversations, so I can't answer your thing.
I understand. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It's no problem. It's a hard answer to give folks.
Yeah. Was that but how did it feel to revisit, we never really, it's not like we forget our connections with our parents. That's like you said, that stuff is cemented in our minds. But what was the process like of going back and thinking about them? Did you find yourself thinking about them just in light of being a person who has, survived and lived through so much?
Writing it down so other people could read about it was itself a process, a change, a challenge, because all these things that are hard are private business. And I can see my mother there in that picture going, you're not supposed to tell anybody about those things. So,
Right.
So I can always, if I wanted to, imagine that they're condemning me for having let them be seen in any kind of an ill light. But I think what I set out to do was to say, family is complicated, and nobody, unless they're abusive and horrible people, nobody is a villain. Nobody gets it right. Nobody gets it all wrong. I forgive my family, and hopefully they forgave me in turn for the ways that I hurt them. Family is complicated, and mine is way up there in the higher thing of complicated. And my life story also is an unusual and fantastic story. And the jewel seems to be the music that I've got to give, but it's not the only story. And that was what I thought. All these are worth telling, and nobody will be harmed by the telling of them. I won't ever tell the worst about anybody or say the worst about anybody. I'll try to tell a measured and hopeful story. And I think that's what I did.
You certainly did. You also, of course, write about, some relationships from the past.
Forgive me, because I'm going to have to do one more question, and then I gotta go.
Oh no, that's totally good. I think that where I would like to wrap up is by asking you.
And I really enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, I absolutely, Rickie. It's a real thrill. I enjoy it. What I wanted to wrap up with was asking. A couple years ago, you issued your first couple records on your own label.
Yeah.
Are you in control of all of your masters at this point? Do you have the rights to do everything you want with your?
That's a good question. Not exactly, but kind of. A number of people sued Warner Brothers to have possession of their masters because somebody wasn't paying attention and let it get by that the artist could have them back. But of course, Warner Brothers stopped that lawsuit. And so what my manager at the time did was get me the rights to them for 10 years. So, hope I live longer than 10 years, but I have them for a long period to come. And I can do in America, not Europe. I can put them out and make money from them. And hopefully I had wanted to put out Pirates with the first record and do something really great and have it in place when the book came out, but I just didn't have it all together. So yes, I do. I do have it, and I'll also own the magazine and Flying Cowboys before we're done. So
there you go. Well, that's great to hear, and I'm glad that it's in your hands for right now.
Me too.
And that you can do what you need to do with it. Rickie, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for writing this great book. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks for talking about it. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
All right. Have fun in Phoenix.
I will. Have a good night. Bye.
But how come he don't come? PLP let me hear down at the meter no more. How come they turn off the TV and they hang that sign on the door?
Thanks for listening to Transmissions. I'm Jason Woodbury. I write, host, and produce the show. Editing and sound by Andrew Horton. Sarah Goldstein makes our art, and Jonathan Mark Wallace does a visualizer version of the show. Our executive producer is Aquarium Drunkard founder Justin Gage. AD is by heads, for heads, so hit us up on Patreon, help us keep making the show. We'll be back next week with Nathan Salzberg of the Alan Lomax Archive to discuss his new album of gorgeous Jewish music, The Psalms. Hope you'll join us. Stay safe until then. Thanks for tuning in to Transmissions.